David Schneer, thanks so much for being on Boss Academy. We're really excited to have you on the collaboration zone, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. Been a long time coming.
Thank you, my friend. It's good to see you.
Well,
So,
absolutely, we appreciate it, and having you a member of Boss Academy is it's been such an enriching experience, and you have been somebody who, from the beginning, has always been there to give and share. And I know this conversation today is going to really take things to another level. You spent many years building out the Merrill Research organization where you focus on market research, but now the Merrill Institute has become an area where you're focused on nonverbal communication, which most people would know as body language. But it sounds like those two worlds are kind of merging together. Where do you stand with that today?
well, first of all, thank you for having me. Secondly, that's a great question, and it's a kind of a complicated one. Let me see if I can't simplify it. Uh, Merrill Research was founded in 1986, and our company helps other companies bring new products to market. We also help companies with their strategic communications. And there's several ways that we do that. We're a multi-methodological research company, and I know you know what that means. But
Yeah.
for those listening who may not know what that means, it means that we practice two types of research. One is quantitative research, generally think telephone, think online surveys, and the other is qualitative research, which is think focus groups and in-depth interviews, face-to-face research. That's really been my focus over the years at Merrill Research. I have a team of colleagues who handle the quant. But over the years, Paul, after conducting thousands and thousands of interviews in all sorts of countries, all different types of folks, it quickly became evident to me that what people say is oftentimes contradictory with what their bodies are telling me. And it became embedded in my practice to be able to first understand these body language indications and then be able to use them to be able to notice when people are tracking with you and when they're not, to hone the communications, to know when you're really engaged with somebody and when you're not. And so, Merrill Research, we're still conducting qualitative and quantitative research, but in 2016, I formed the Merrill Institute for Nonverbal Intelligence to teach people the techniques that I use in my research practice. It could be used pretty much anywhere.
So let's talk about that very topic of when we know somebody's engaged with us. Body language tells us so much. And it was funny. I used to think when I was talking to people and they tilt their head to the side that I was kind of losing them. And after learning through you, it helped me understand that no, that's actually means that you're potentially engaging with them in some really compelling ways. But how do we really know when somebody's engaged with the things we're saying to them? Our message is getting through.
There's several indicators, and probably the best example is the one you just gave with a head tilt. So when somebody's tilting their head, Paul, that means they're super engaged with what you have to say. Now, if they're smiling and tilting their head, it just doesn't get much better than that. That is what you want. And we're talking about a true smile that involves the eyes.
Yeah.
Other indications that people are really tracking with you is are they leaning toward you or are they leaning away from you? Are they using their hands and engaged when they're talking or not? Are they have good and proper eye gaze, or are they looking away? Are they looking askance? Is their head back, which would be a sign of superiority and I'm not really tracking? So there's lots of things that you can see what people are doing when they're not engaged.
Well, it even comes down to those micro expressions. You and I have talked about this in the past, and a lot of the work you do through Merrill is you help people understand that reading micro expressions is also a powerful way to understand what's the message somebody's taking away, how are they reacting to it, how are they feeling in that moment, and can you talk a little bit about micro expressions and what that means?
Yeah, we could spend days on that. But basically, micro expressions are very, very brief indications of emotion on the face. And there's 7 of them. There's happiness, there's sadness, there's fear, there's surprise, there's disgust, there's contempt, and then there's a neutral face. And you can see these emotions on people's faces before they ever say anything. The micro expressions are just that. They're about a half a second. They're a burst of emotion, typically around some sort of stimulus. So, for example, Paul, if we're talking and I stuck my tongue out at you, you would know what that means, right? And you'd go, what did Dave just do? He just stuck his tongue out at me. That's a sign of contempt and disrespect, right? Well, the same thing would happen if I showed you a sign of contempt, but a lot of people don't know what contempt looks like. But yet they're talking to somebody and they think that person is tracking with them, but yet the person with whom they're talking is showing them a sign of contempt, which is an asymmetrical smile that looks like this. And those are micro expressions that are very visible, especially on Zoom. A micro expression of disgust, which is like the bunny nose. And then sadness, fear, anger, all can manifest itself in the face.
Yeah. I always talk about the stinky cheese face, that it's like sometimes when people have that really,
yeah,
you tell they're really, that's probably beyond a micro expression though. That's sometimes very blatant in its own.
No, it's exactly an analogy that I use. You go into your refrigerator and there's something in there moving that's been in a science experiment for, a couple of months, doesn't smell right. And, automatically you probably don't even know it, but you're probably showing a sign of disgust. So yeah, it's totally appropriate.
Okay, so when we're talking to people and we start to understand what these micro expressions represent, how do we put that into action? Because obviously remembering every single little nuance of micro expressions is something that's hard for somebody to do unless they put a lot of time and energy into it. But what are some things that maybe the layman should be looking for as we're talking to people?
Well, the first one is contempt. It really is something that is very visible, it's very easy to spot. What it means is that somebody is either disagreeing with you or they think they're better than you. Contempt has a twofold meaning. One is I really don't like what you just said, and the other is I feel superior to you. Okay. And it's an asymmetrical smile, which looks like that. It's very quick. Then when you see that, that's an indication that what just came out of their mouth does not track with that sign of contempt. And so what you'd want to do is you'd want to reintroduce that question that caused that contempt, kind of circle back and see if you get that sign of contempt again. And if you do, then you have pretty good evidence that there's something bothering this person. You don't know what it is at this point, but what you want to do is you want to pivot. At that point, you want to say, so step back and say, so do you have any concerns or any questions? Okay. Would you like to take a break? We do this when people are blocked, Paul, when they're physically blocked with their body and it's clear they're not picking up what you're throwing down. Best thing to do is get up and walk. Get them out of that position.
So as we're reading someone's body language, and this is something that we put into practice, it seems like there's an opportunity for, I guess, really disconnecting from what they're sharing with us because we're so fixated on watching their body language. How do you balance that? Because, I mean, obviously being fully engaged is important, but catching these maybe clues that might drive us down a better path is important. How do we balance that?
Well, there's tips and techniques that I can share now that will help people quickly gauge the condition that somebody is in. But it's, Paul, it's not unlike speaking a foreign language, right? When you're first learning a foreign language, you're praying that people aren't talking fast to you because you're trying to process it. Eventually, you become steeped in the language, and speed no longer becomes an issue. The same with body language. And what I can say is there's 7 micro expressions and 26 variations of those, and there's about over 400 body language indications. We teach about 100 of those. So there's a lot of content out there, but essentially there's 2 things that you want to make sure is happening when you're communicating with somebody, and that is you want them in a state of psychological comfort. Okay? Without that, you're not going to get through to anybody. Well, what does that mean? What does psychological comfort mean? Well, when we're in a state of psychological comfort, we tend to raise our hands. We tend to defy gravity. We tend to exhibit gravity-defying behavior. And when we're not comfortable, when we're in a state of psychological discomfort, well, your mother was right. We begin to stoop, sit up straight, Paul, right? So right there, you can begin to see comfort versus discomfort. And then the other measure is proxemics, how close people are to one another. So people that are doing well, they may be partners, they may be intimate, they may be friends, they're very close together. People that are in disharmony are generally further apart. So those are things that we teach: situational awareness, thin slice assessment, just walking into a room and seeing if everybody is spread out and disparate and stiff. Maybe you've got a problem. You go into that same room, but everybody's bundled up with pods of people and interacting. There's some buzz, there's some excitement there.
Yeah, I think that's such a really interesting dynamic. And, I think about the world we live in today, David, where a lot of the meetings we conduct are on Zoom or some other video conferencing. A lot of our body motion takes place below the camera line. Not everybody uses their hands when they talk, and sometimes people are just like sitting there very glued to the chair. So, when somebody's engaged, they're talking with their hands or they're really expressive. That's really impactful and important, and it allows you to really maybe tap into something. It's like, man, I'm really engaging with this person. That's phenomenal. But when they don't do that, because you're not in a personal environment, sometimes it's really hard, and you can't feed off of the right energy. What can you do to maybe use your own form of body language influence to maybe change the way that somebody's interacting with you in that environment?
For sure, the digital environment presents a lot of issues. For sure, it hampers communication. Throughout the pandemic, we have been relegated to conducting these interviews virtually, and it's worked out well. But next week, I'll be flying out to Boston, Chicago, and Irvine to conduct in-person focus groups, because we know how rich that data is going to be, because we're going to be able to see people's bodies. And Zoom, it's a lot about the camera quality, audio quality, light quality. You want to make yourself visible. You want to wear colors that are soothing. You'll notice I'm wearing a blue shirt. That's not by accident. We know research suggests that colors like purple and blue are far better than colors like brown, for example. You want to be able to use your hands. There is no such thing as a mentor of mine once said, there is no such thing as, well, there is such a thing as a poker face. There is no such thing as a poker body. So even though, Paul, even though you can't see the lower extremities, you can see things, if you're highly trained, that others might not. So for example, let me show you something. I want you to do a leg cleanse, and that's where you take the palms of your hand and start rubbing your thighs. Paul, start doing that for me. Okay. Yeah. Now, I can neither see your hands nor your legs, but I kind of have an idea what's going on there.
Yeah.
That would be an indication that you're nervous. You can see the shirt moving. Also, indications, blocking could be one. That could be a sign of blocking. People tend to cover their suprasternal notch. They tend to cover their mouth. They tend to do all sorts of things. And it's your job really to kind of decipher what they're saying and try and bring them out. Ask them about themselves, try and use a little humor, compliment them. And sometimes, you just get somebody who you just want to send them an electric shock through the screen.
I mean, I had that very same thing happen yesterday on a call, and it was somebody that I was invited to connect with, and I was introduced by somebody I totally trust, and I was excited to talk to this person. I get on the call, and they seemed so disinterested in everything I said. They were very standoffish, and I refused to give up. I'm having this conversation. I'm asking questions. We found one piece of commonality, and all of a sudden, the whole conversation changed. And you saw her eyes light up. She started smiling. She started asking questions. And who knows what kind of day she was having? Who knows what really triggered it? But isn't that kind of the answer, David? Sometimes finding common ground, because you don't see them interacting a certain way. But the minute you do, the minute you see that shift, then all of a sudden it gives you permission to maybe go further. Is that correct?
Absolutely. It's like one of my colleagues who I trained was telling me how she used micro expressions when she took over the account of another person who hadn't really done a good job with the account. And so in the first interview, the new account person, my colleague, went in to talk to the manager of the company for whom she was working. And there was a lot of contemptuous and disgusting looks that were shot towards my colleague. And at some point, my colleague just said, I just want you to understand. Yeah, exactly, Paul. I just want you to understand that the other person is no longer on the account. I'm here. I need to understand what went wrong. And I need you to tell me because, I really care. I want to fix it. And wouldn't you know, with that invitation, she saved that business because that person was able to tell her what went wrong. And my colleague was able to validate it, was able to correct it and fix it. But had she not noticed those signs, she might have let that go, right? Just like if you had let that other woman go, you might not have had a fruitful conversation.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, I'm running on very little sleep today, and I'm feeling extremely fatigued and tired. And you're talking, and I felt a yawn coming on. Had nothing to do with your conversation. In fact, I love you and I love everything you have to say, but I'm feeling very tired. I started to fight off a yawn. It's amazing how yawns they're contagious, but they're also extremely distracting, right? If you see someone yawn, we often internalize it. Oh my God, I'm losing them, when it may not even be any of that. How do we avoid making false assumptions on somebody's reactions?
Well, it's all about context. I can tell just by looking at you and the tone of your voice and both of our schedules that you're tired. Yawning is contagious. If you would yawn, it's quite possible I would, to subconsciously mirror with you. I see it a lot. I see it on my staff, and it's hard to look into a screen and a camera all day long and not be tired. It drains you. So
very much,
let it out, and you can say something like, "Oh, excuse me, I'm so sorry. It's not about you. It's just about my lack of sleep." Things you can do to compensate for that. But, we see a lot of things on Zoom that you would never see in a lab or any other focus group facility unless you were on Zoom. You see a lot.
There's no question. But interestingly enough, you just touched on a point. First off, I'm going to tell you, you never bore me. And if my energy seems low, that's on me. But I'm really enjoying this conversation because I know you bring some amazing insights around this. But you mentioned a word that really goes hand in hand with the idea of studying nonverbal intelligence, body language, however you want to position it. And that's the idea of mirroring. You've got, one person acting a certain way, another person over here. If you mirror their actions in some ways and it's natural, it can be super, super engaging.
It's critical, and it really helps to foster communications that is successful both ways. And the reason it works is because it puts people at ease. It puts them in a state of comfort. It's Isopraxism, which in Greek means the same behavior, mirroring. And you can do it in business meetings. It's harder to do in Zoom. But it takes a little bit of practice. It takes a little bit of observation. You don't want to be herky-jerky with it. But with practice, just like anything else, you can begin to cross your legs when somebody else crosses their legs. Lean back when they lean back. Lean in when they lean in. And that gives them the sense that you're really tracking with them.
Well, and it feels very comfortable often when you see somebody acting the way you're acting at a subconscious level. And that is such a really disarming way of engaging with somebody if done right. So one of the areas that I think often comes up when we talk about body language is there's experts, quote unquote experts out there teaching the idea that you can tell if somebody's lying through body language. But when I have talked to you about this, that's not obviously a clear distinction that you can make, but you can maybe tell if they are perhaps not being transparent with you. Can you talk a little bit about that piece of it? Because lying and body language don't always go hand in hand.
Well, that's one of the biggest misconceptions that there is out there. And one of the reasons that I wanted to start the Merrill Institute is combat a lot of stuff that I see online. It's absolutely misleading and has been refuted by six decades of solid research conducted by some of the world's greatest authorities on deception. So the reality is, Paul, there is no Pinocchio effect. There is no one micro expression or body language position that is indicative of deceit. Okay. In fact, most deceit is not caught in real time. It's caught after confessions or irrefutable or controvertible data or evidence is found. Furthermore, people are very poor lie detectors. Studies have been done over the past six decades on lie detection, and human beings have no better chance than flipping a coin to determine if somebody is lying or not. Okay. So what we can do, though, what we can say is that there are indications of deceit when it is clustered around a stimulus. What does that mean? Okay. So you ask a question and I say, hey, Paul, where were you last night? And all of a sudden I see Paul look away and lean back. Okay, well, maybe at that point, Paul's uncomfortable or somebody distracted him. I don't know. A little while later, we're talking and I bring up the topic. So, Paul, about last night. And all of a sudden I see a shot of anger, a shot of disgust, and your face starts to turn red. Your breathing gets a little heavier. Now my spidey senses are beginning to tingle. So these indications that you're looking for okay, are things like this. Number one is general asymmetry of the body. Okay. What does that mean? That means that anytime there's incongruent behavior in the body, that's a sign that something is amiss. Could be a sign of deception. What do I mean? All right, how about shoulders? When you do a shoulder shrug, that's symmetrical. One shoulder coming up, asymmetrical. Liars tend to talk a lot. They tend to be very verbose. They don't like pregnant pauses. They like to fill up the wall, see what sticks. Okay. Liars tend to stare. And the reason they stare is because they're watching your reaction. Plus, they're also thinking of their next lie. So their pupils are enormous and their eyes are enormous. And most liars think that blinking is a sign of lying, which it can be. But blinking is highly idiosyncratic, in particular to each of us.
Yeah.
Liars can begin to itch or turn red, like I just said. Liars, if you can see their feet, liars' feet tend to be pointed towards the exit because they don't like the hot seat. They want to be out of the hot seat. Okay.
Interesting.
So those are some of the indications, Paul, that you can put together. Not even, there's a reason why lie detection is not admissible in court. And the reason is it's not all that reliable. It's not the machine that determines deception. It's the operator.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So, David, when you got started in this space, you mentioned that there were a couple factors that really led you down this path, like the misrepresentation about lying within body language. But what was maybe one of your first aha moments when you really started studying this? What really stood out to you?
Wow. I think one of the incidents that really stood out to me was when I was in a very strategic study involving value-added resellers in the channel. And these are small systems integrators who take things like printers and copiers and then we'll bring them over to your business, Paul, and set them up. Well, they buy these printers from big manufacturers. And we were doing a study, one-on-one interviewing with VARs all over the country who were reselling major printer brands. Think Brother, think Epson, think Dell, right? These kinds of brands. And as I began to interview these folks, I began to get some strange reactions around a particular brand, which I cannot mention here, until I actually talked to a value-added reseller in Los Angeles, and I asked him a question. I said, John, we'll say his name is John. I said, John, are all printer manufacturers the same in the channel? I mean, they all provide you with great materials and support to sell printers or not? He says, oh, no, some are better than others. And so at that point, I used a technique that I had just started using. I've been practicing, and it's a great technique to elicit emotions without asking a question. I could have asked this guy, so what do you think about Acme brand? And that would have given him a chance to think about an answer. But what I wanted to do was lob over a presupposition. So I just looked at him and I said, Acme. Well, did I get a reaction? And it was visceral. And I mean, he leaned back, he looked away, disgust, fear, surprise. It was like I hit the jackpot with this guy. So I said, so John, I said, what do you think about Acme? And he said, oh, Acme's fine. And I said, are you sure? And he said, well, yeah, Acme's fine. They're fine from the standpoint that all my customers know Acme, but I'll never do business with them again because they went around my back. I brought a deal, 50 printers, my client to supply Acme printers. And what did they do? They went around my back. That's a violation of deal registration. That moment, my client tried to understand where that came out of. How did we get that information? I had to go back because they missed all this, right? So I had to go back to the video and show them this guy's answers and why I went down that path. So that would be a telling moment. I actually wrote a blog about it. Super powerful technique.
Yeah, I love it. That's such a powerful message, and I think the work you're doing is important. And I hope everybody in the community and those that are exposed to this message are really interested in learning more about this practice, because it is so powerful. It is very transformative. The work that you've been doing has made an impact on me, and I know there's going to be more you're going to be bringing to the community. But in the meantime, David, are there some places you would recommend that we send people so that they might be able to learn a little bit more about this? Where within Merrill Institute can they possibly gain some more information?
Well, we are trying. Thank you, by the way, for having me. The name of the website is themerrillinstitute.com or merrillresearch.com. They're sister organizations. Either one would have really nice short blogs on all sorts of body indications that you would never imagine. So it's free. You can go download it, take it. We want to explain these things and give this stuff away so people have an idea of, in an age when the truth is hard to come by.
Yeah.
What are you really hearing?
So, absolutely. Well, I'm looking forward to sharing some of those resources within the collaboration zone as well.
Absolutely.
And David, I look forward to having more conversations on this very topic, and maybe we can get some more people involved in this, because I think that's one of the things that might be a really interesting exercise is it shows some people how micro expressions can really be read and what an impact it can make. Because I know as you're talking to people, and if you can pick up on those nuances, it can really transform the way the conversation goes.
It really matters. And you hear all sorts of statistics about what percent of communications is body language. A lot of that has been misinterpreted, but let's say that at least 50%, if not more, is body language and paraverbal, how you say things, right? And so it's important. And if you're missing that, you're missing a lot of cues. And things you can do to sharpen that would be sometimes watch TV without the sound.
Oh,
see if you can see actors. We have a training platform that also certifies you. So you would go through and train through all the micro expressions. And at the end, if you pass the certification test, you would be certified, like I am, to read micro expressions. So you can go very deep if you want. If you want just general information, we have that too.
Wonderful. We're going to share some more of these resources here in the collaboration zone as well. David Schneer, thanks again for being an amazing part of Boss Academy, a good friend, and somebody that is just giving back so much. So thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Paul.